Yeah, we had it last time. Make some changes. We're live streaming.
All right, you're gonna see. You can just get started off.
All right, good evening. Okay, great. Eva, I know you're looking right into Joe's face, but can you see the group of people behind us? Okay, good. All right. I'm just going to start off with a quick, a few words just to introduce everybody to what we're trying to do here. So these meetups, we call them the free meetups. They're really designed to give you something back, something, you know, some value back, right? And so the idea is these freedom meetups, we want to bring in people like Eva Kimani from Kenya, and last month we had Greg Foss from Canada. Greg is a well-known expert. Eva is also an expert in Bitcoin in Africa. But we're trying to, so we're bringing in, we think are high-quality speakers, so that you get to hear other perspectives. What we also want to do is give you some insights, some education, broadly speaking. Try not to be pedantic, but we want to give you some feedback or something to take away with you. So the idea.
Talking to the top.
All right, so we're back. So again, these meetups are designed to give you something for taking your time out of your day, for coming up from New York or wherever, sitting on the highway. Mike's in.
Stand by.
Sorry, we're trying to learn that. By the way, it's, I think it's 3 a.m. where you are.
It might be muted. Can you hear me? Eva? Hello? Eva? Can you hear me? Eva, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So I was just saying to this assembly of people that it's, I think, 3 a.m. in the morning where you are. So you have gone the extra mile to give us the benefit of your time. So anyway, trying to again, the purpose of this is to show everybody something of value. So I'm going to turn it over to Eva at this point, and Eva, it's. So Eva, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk to address our people here. You are here, in addition to me, you are the small screen of my computer, my large screen up above, so people can see your face and your gestures. So we're going to let you talk at this point and give us your perspective on Bitcoin in Africa and business development or development in Africa. Okay, and I know you have a powerful message and story, so let's start with your story. Can you give us your story about your work and about your community?
Okay, thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. You can all hear me. Wait every time. Okay, good. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for taking my time. It's great to connect with people, and especially on common topics like Bitcoin. So my name is Eva. I'm Kenyan. Right now I'm in Nairobi. It's 2 a.m. here. I am by profession a lawyer. So a bit of my background. So I'm not sure how much you know, but in the last 10 years, I'm a lawyer by profession, and in the last 10 years, our country has gone through sort of financial and technology revolution. We got the giving us a market for the Silicon Savannah. And during that financial and technology revolution, we have a large section of our population that's unbanked. That's in Kenya, it's in Eastern Africa, entire population of Africa. A large section is unbanked and doesn't have access to financial services. And so there have been there's been an urgency around that and a need to meet certain people, especially in brackets, who don't get access to banking services, who don't get access to credits, don't get access to securities. So we went with heard of it. M-Pesa. Has anyone heard of M-Pesa? M-P-E-S-A? No? Okay, so M-Pesa is like, I think it's similar to Venmo or Cash App, which is on there. So it's a way to send money using a SIM card. And it happened around 2006, and we really grew up and we really incorporated a lot of people into the financial system, people who had historically been extreme. And so being here in the, I guess, what the world refers to as the third world or the global south, we have a sort of two stacked problem. One stack is that we have what the world deems as poverty. Poverty because I have a different, I want to talk about poverty better, but then we have one monetary system that's underpinned by you guys' monetary system. So our Kenyan shilling is pegged to the value of the dollar. So that creates sort of like a double whammy situation where we are affected by the decisions that the Fed makes, but we're also affected by the internal economic situations here. So going through that level of financial pressure, when Bitcoin came out, it initially reached our market, I believe, through the gig economy. So here in Kenya, and we are infamous. I don't know if you've heard this, but there's an entire history where American college students hire Kenyans online to do their homework, their assignments, right? And so being, there's a large population of young, savvy, educated, capable individuals here who just don't have access to opportunities. So they go online and find different opportunities online, and one of them being that. So these young, savvy, gig economy who are working multiple jobs started earning money through Bitcoin, and that's how Bitcoin initially penetrated our market, because to make a transfer, without Bitcoin, to make a transfer from the United States to Kenya, it's an extremely long process that routes through, I'm sure you know about the SWIFT banking system, and so the routing bank is maybe somewhere in the United States or maybe somewhere in Europe, and before it reaches Kenya, and that also, that intermediary system, a lot of value is lost there. So Bitcoin just became a simple way to send money, simple and instantaneous. Now with Lightning, it's a lot better. So there was probably in 2015, there was there's like a boom in cryptocurrencies, and when I say cryptocurrencies, I mean the full spectrum of Ethereum and all the other coins. In Kenya, through first through the digital no the gig economy, the digital gig economy, but also now trading activity expanded largely in this country, and that's similar to most other African countries, especially if you're looking at Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa. So these are some of the countries that have the highest crypto penetration. So you have a high mobile phone penetration, not so good, but better internet penetration as well. And so a lot of our lives are wrapped around our mobile phones, our finances, because like I told you, M-Pesa, so our finances, we deal with them on phone. A lot of our work, Kenya is literally a mobile phone based economy in an interesting way. And so crypto had already that sort of runway to enter our market because it's easy to use, and it's easy to use on a mobile phone, right? So when I personally, in my work, I worked a lot in financial technology, right? Financial inclusion, and products, because there are a few products that try and provide services to the unbanked, the underbanked, and also, try and facilitate, trade and the financing around that. So working in that industry, I got to understand, I got to see firsthand where the bottlenecks are, how everything affects us here as everything affects a small business person. And I think I should also prefix by saying that we have a large informal sector. So 80% of Kenyans are not employed in a white collar employment sort of setup. So they're self-employed in an informal sector. Maybe they're selling clothes, selling foodstuffs, or like I said, the gig economy. So they don't have like a formal employment or a formal structure, but they earn money that way. So we have that sort of a backdrop, and so crypto generally entered our market. So personally, when I was, first introduced to it, I think it was 2017, I was like, this just feels like a scam, and at that exact same time, there was a boom in multi-level marketing scams here. So there are a lot of multi-level marketing companies or coming, there are Ponzi schemes. And so there was something about crypto to me that felt similar to multi-level marketing scams that we had seen go bust. And then there were the proliferation of coins. Everyone was launching an ICO at that point and rug pulling. So there was a lot of carnage, in the crypto industry. So as we were doing our research, and for myself as a lawyer, handling those type of matters, I came to the realization that really what stood out from the crowd and what set itself apart was Bitcoin. And other than the instantaneous payment systems, right? And like I said, we don't have that base layer of payment systems that serves a wide variety, as other parts of the world, right? Especially a low income bracket, they don't have that. And especially when you start to look at cross-border transactions and remittances, right? Do we know what remittances are, right? I'm assuming, but you can ask if you don't. So we didn't have that base layer of transactions. But more than that, the case for Bitcoin for me is that it's a decentralized system. And if you remember that I told you about our double whammy situation, that we are not only affected by our internal macro and microeconomic scenario, we are also affected by whatever happens in the United States. So the United States, we had a pandemic. The US gave you guys all checks, created inflation, the inflation trickled down back to us, and we didn't get the same stimulus checks, right? So it creates a sort of a layered issue. And what we're seeing, even outside of Bitcoin circles, even outside of the Bitcoin narrative, is a lot of talk about moving away from the dollar system, right? And doing trade. So the dollar system is important to us, right? Dollars are important to us as an economy because a lot of our debt is dollar denominated debt, and a lot of trade, especially in critical supplies such as petroleum, energy, petroleum, food imports are denominated in dollars. So our economy is essentially, at least at the macro level, is dollar dependent, right? Then when you come to the micro level, we have, like I said, our own internal economic structures and markets, which are in our local currency. So then you have the risk of, the value of the shilling versus the value of the dollar. So our Kenya shilling, that's our currency, and it impacting the cost of food, the cost of fuel. I was doing a comparison with a friend of mine. We literally pay more for a gallon of fuel than you do in America. We pay more for electricity than you do in literally. We are a poorer nation, but our cost of living is much higher in terms of basic necessities than a lot of places in the United States. So that's where you see the pain point, right? That's where you see the real issues. And so moving away from the dollar system, in ideally, it should relieve our economies of that pressure, right? And so we are seeing, for example, recently our president indicated a desire to, or entered into a trade deal with Saudi Arabia to buy oil, in Kenya shillings, right? Which is an interesting, it was an interesting first time that has happened in our economy, and he indicated that there's more to come, right? So we are, we're living in a world where we call it the petrodollar, but especially if petroleum is sold in other currencies other than the dollar, then especially economies in the global south will see what we'll have a little bit of that pressure relieved. So for me as a Bitcoiner, I would prefer if we were a Bitcoin country, right? Like I said, it's a decentralized system. I'm sure you guys know what Bitcoin is, so I'm not going to go into all that. But the value it brings to our economies is the freedom, is the freedom from that dollar dependency. So I think that's a good basis about my background. Unless you have more questions on that, Steve. But yeah.
All right, that's a very detailed overview of the challenges that you face in Kenya. I think it's very timely to talk about the dollar in the world and the impact that that the global economy feels from being tied to the dollar. I think the example of what happened in COVID is very good because everybody in the U.S. received a check, from our Treasury Department to help us through the pandemic crisis. Good news and bad news. Some people began seeing that as a stepping stone to what we call a universal basic income, which again is being debated as a possibility, while we still face massive budget deficits. So there's a real push and pull going on. And what's happening in Saudi Arabia, the other BRIC nations, South Africa, Brazil, etc., India, looking to free themselves from the whipsaw effects of the dollar when our domestic policies clash with these international policies that the dollar more or less controls or runs. So I think that's very timely, Eva. I think it's good to hear your perspective sitting in Kenya, to this group here, who enjoys a financial privilege by being, in the country where the dollar is king, if you will. Okay. What I would like to ask you is, so we're dealing in this age of global communication with different narratives. We have a mainstream media in the U.S., in the West, in the global North, whether it's the Times out of the UK, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, whether it's the New York Times, our other mainstream media outlets that push a narrative about, what needs to be done to bring the global South into the modern era of banking and finance. And so I'd like you to comment from your perspective, being in Africa, and certainly being aware of these issues. I'd like to know what your perspective is on, how do Western narratives change to fit the realities of African business and entrepreneurship today?
Okay, so if you will allow me to answer that question in a bit of a long-winded way, but I think it would give us, a bit of context to where I'm coming from. So when we talk about the global South, and especially Africa, it's the continent that is associated with the word poverty, right? And this word, poverty, what exactly does it mean? There is a monetary definition of poverty that you live below a certain dollar amount per day, right? That is $1 per day. You are deemed by the United Nations and co. To live in extreme poverty, right? But then there's the colloquial meaning of the word poverty. And the colloquial meaning of the word poverty is essentially what you alluded to, that you don't live in a world that gives you the full suite of the Western lifestyle experience. So the West becomes the benchmark for what poverty is and isn't, and the definition of that term is defined based on the basis of the Western lifestyle, right? So now we had here in Africa, we had our own lifestyle, right? Especially pre-colonial lifestyles, where generally the average African was self-sufficient in the sense that they produced what they needed, right? And so then we had the colonial invasion, right? And during the colonial times, a different economic model was introduced to Africa that was foreign to the African. And not only was it foreign, for the most part, the African was deliberately excluded from it. So it was an economic model based on the home countries, the Western model, that was intended to create, these colonies where, which not intended, actually did create these colonies where you had a two-tier system with the colonial settlers at a higher level, the African at a lower level, and the basis of the colonial system was to find new lands, extract minerals, but particularly to the African was to extract cheap labor out of the African, right? And so the extraction of cheap labor so how did they extract cheap labor out of the African? How they did that was to, break the self-sufficiency model that was there pre-colonial times. So you no longer can grow your own food, you no longer can access your own housing, So and they did that through the imposition of tax. And I point to this because Bitcoin is really about bringing back the value of labor, right? The value of human labor. Your time value is brought back to you because the Keynesian system robs you. So with the imposition of taxes, the forced labor regimes, the African was removed from being self-sufficient for the most part, right? It was removed from being self-sufficient was paid barely anything, just enough to survive and pay taxes, literally. And then we had independence. So at the point of independence, what happened is that we had especially in most African, and I think in most former colonies around the world, you have the competition of values. So you have this new value system that has been introduced, which is a monetary system, right? And then you have people who have been excluded from that monetary system. And so the issue that Africa faces has always been, how do we absorb people into the monetary system, right? Because the people who are outside the monetary system are considered poor, right? That's what poverty is that you are outside this system based on the Western economic model. Those are the people considered poor because that system doesn't have electricity, that system doesn't have roads, infrastructure, healthcare, it doesn't have the form of education that is considered the global system of education, right? So then how do we include them? Because that's what poverty eradication is essentially including people into this system and channeling them through. And as you can imagine, during the colonial period, there were multiple bottlenecks created to ensure the African is excluded. So during the post-colonial period, when Africa was newly independent and our new regimes were thinking about what to do, there was also the issue of World War II that was happening at pretty much the exact same time. So African nations are gaining their independence. The world is just recovering from World War II. Then there was the introduction of the Keynesian, philosophy of economics, right? And the Keynesian philosophy of economics told Africa and most of the global South, pin your economies to our dollar, and we will. And this is how you will gain the value of the Western system, right? Because that's how you will get the value from the West back into your economies. So unfortunately, the underpinning assumptions of how the African economies would grow were wrong. The Keynesian, the Bretton Woods had a wrong assumption about how African economies would grow because internally we had a conflict of systems, right? So you have, which I have explained, that conflict of systems. So in the West, you hear a lot about Africa is poor, Africa is this, Africa is that, right? And there's not really a lot of thought as to why things are the way they are. I think that we need to redefine poverty. And because when we redefine poverty, we redefine how we approach poverty, right? So poverty essentially is that you are excluded from a Western lifestyle, right? And that means that it doesn't matter what you do have, what you don't have, is that you don't have the values and what Steve has called the privileges of living in a Western society, right? And so how poverty, the attempts to eradicate poverty have been mostly through aid, which hasn't served its purpose at all in this. My assessment of the aid industry is that it hasn't really served any purpose. And rather than building models that work for Africans, right? So what model of development can work here? Because the assumptions that our behavior would align with and our patterns would align with that of the West have been proven wrong, particularly in the last 50, 60 years. And so we have people who continue to be left out and struggle to be included in that system. So building around what exists here by not first deeming it as poverty, right? So so the narrative that I want us to change is first perceiving Africa as poor, right? Because it's not actually poor. Africa has massive human capital, massive resources, and also the ways that Africans keep their wealth they might not keep it in money, in monetary terms. They keep it in different ways. They keep it in land, they keep it in livestock, so Africans actually have value. But because the models that exist struggle to deal with the models that existed before, there's a lack of proper communication. And so I think that's how I would like the world to continue to shift the narrative. Not that Africa is poor, Africa is, this horrible place. No, it's that how do we build models around what actually works and what is, indigenous to the people, because they had a system and had a system that was working. So understanding where that system was broken and seeing how we can fill those gaps, and then allowing the African to develop in a way that feels authentic and in a way that works with the circumstances around them. Yeah.
Okay. You can hear me again, yes? Okay. So what? Before we get too far into this, I wanted to ask if anybody in the audience has any questions for you based on what you've already expressed. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Eva from, about money, Africa, this Bitcoin revolution in Africa? Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Yes. I'm curious how government is reacting. Big workers make money in Bitcoin. Is anyone trying to track how much they made and tax it?
So the question, Eva, is how is your government reacting to Bitcoin in the current context? Your gig workers who accept Bitcoin and as for the exchange of value in their work, is it being taxed? Is it being threatened? I mean, how does the government react to Bitcoin?
Okay, so the state initially took I wouldn't say an outrightly hostile position, but there were communications that, indicated that it wasn't too friendly to Bitcoin, but there aren't any regulations in place yet. So what happened is that the central bank ring-fenced the legacy financial system and put out a memo that they were banned from handling Bitcoin. So banks and other financial institutions that are regulated by the central bank cannot handle cryptocurrency in any way, shape, or form. But it's not illegal in the country. And actually, yesterday we had the first bill proposed by the Capital Markets Authority, which is the equivalent of the SEC, which is an attempt to deal with cryptocurrencies as securities. The concern with that bill on my part is, one, like you said, the taxation. They want to tax digital wallets, they want to tax gains, and even just if you hold a cryptocurrency for more than 12 months, apparently that you should pay capital gains on that. So, but it's still a proposal. It doesn't. And another concerning thing, it doesn't differentiate whether Bitcoin from the other cryptocurrencies, whether it's a commodity vis-a-vis others being securities. And so I think we have a long journey ahead of us in terms of determining from a legislative and regulatory perspective what Bitcoin is. There hasn't been much other than the ICOs. So I mentioned there were a lot of ICOs around 2016, around 2017, and there was mostly civil litigation around those ICOs. But other than that, we haven't had much regulatory action. But there is a task force that was formed by the financial regulators to look into cryptocurrencies and determine how they want to regulate them. My assumption is that they will. What we usually do is we usually wait for either America or Europe to move, and then we follow. So I think we are following what's happening in Europe recently, and also what's happening in the United States. So yeah.
That's a good question. All right. Anybody else have a question they'd like to ask?
I'm wondering if they're embracing it as a store of value versus just a little
So the question is, are Africans embracing Bitcoin as a store of value, or is it merely a tool for transactions outside the dollar system?
So that's a good question. Yes, but not as much as in the West. So at least from what I know is that in the West it's mostly a store of value, and I guess a few people are using it to make transactions, but mostly it's in cold storage. Hold your Bitcoin, never sell. But here, because of the income challenges, a lot of people don't have that much of a disposable income, so people use it mostly in trading or as a means of settling payments, especially across borders. So I think people are aware of Bitcoin as a store of value, and those in, I think, higher income brackets do consider it a store of value. So it depends on the income bracket of the individual. Those in a low income bracket, the behavior we're seeing mostly is trading and using it to settle transactions. So yeah.
I'm standing here with, and I don't have it on me, it's in the box over there, I don't want to walk in front of the camera, but a $50 billion Rwandan note. It says $50 billion on the face of it. Is it in there? Maybe. Nope, never mind. Probably in that box. All right, so anyway, and in terms of the question you asked about, so Bitcoin is known right now for its volatility, and I'm curious about denominating trade in, with people that are exchanging Bitcoin in trade. Do they denominate it in dollars and then try to do the conversion to Bitcoin, or do they just, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin? I mean, how does it work in terms of denominating the trade?
So right now, what we're seeing mostly is they're denominating it in dollars. So they are finding either a service or maybe a good, but the value is in dollars, and they send that value via Bitcoin. So it's basically a strike sort of transaction. So Bitcoin is mostly just the vehicle to send the money for a lot of the gig workers, but a lot of them now are coming to appreciate the value of Bitcoin and considering it as a savings mechanism. I think with more education, and also not just education, but the more that they're able to find a disposable income, the more that they're willing to save it and hold it over the long term. So yeah, but they're denominating it in dollars and then sending it. So when I'm not seeing a lot of sats conversations, it's usually dollars, and then someone sends the Bitcoin value for those dollars. Yeah.
Okay.
Curious, are there any African nations that would use Bitcoin as their standard, like El Salvador? Is there any inroads into that?
So the question is are there any countries in Africa that are looking at Bitcoin as a currency, as like El Salvador, like the country of El Salvador, where Bitcoin becomes the legal tender of the country?
Yes. So the Central African Republic, it's a country in the name in Central Africa that has Bitcoin as legal tender currently, but they also have their own digital coin called Sango coin. So they launched both at the same time. Yeah, so using Bitcoin as legal tender, especially in a nation that doesn't have mass electricity or reliable electricity, isn't going to be very viable. Yes, there's solutions like Machankura. I don't know if you guys have heard of Machankura. It's a solution where you send Bitcoin without electricity, without internet, without connection to internet. So without electricity and connection to internet. So that presents a challenge to Bitcoin itself. It's not just the fiat, it's also the hard infrastructure that lacks in Africa. So a digital currency will penetrate at this point, but it does have the ceiling of people having access to internet and people having access to reliable electricity. So those are I think the only potent challenges that Bitcoin faces in Africa. In terms of its volatility in price, you find that most Africans actually consider its volatility a worthwhile risk to take, and they are taking that risk because the alternative is not really that much better. I told you our system means that our currencies are highly inflationary. We can wake up and the IMF says you have to devalue your currency, so there are bigger risks in Africa than the Bitcoin volatility. And so it's a risk worth taking for a lot of the Africans who believe in it. But, it's fair to say that the more vulnerable lower income brackets, that volatility might be a concern for them. So, yeah.
Given us a tremendous amount of things to think about tonight, and I want to express deep appreciation for your coming on, taking these questions and answering with your own voice what's happening in Africa. I think you've got an extremely important and powerful voice, and I look forward to hearing more from you in different venues. We have one of our team members here who's a strong advocate. Jack Kluzek is a strong advocate of Nostr and Bitcoin payments that are on the Lightning Network. As a token of our appreciation, again, your talk tonight has been extremely valuable. But as a token of our appreciation, I'm going to arrange to send you a small token of Bitcoin as just an expression of how much we appreciate your staying up so late, coming on and talking to a bunch of, not so wise Americans. Okay. So Jack and I will work together at setting you up with the payment of some Bitcoin or some Satoshis. Okay. Thank you very much. Again, deeply appreciate your coming on. We have a couple of younger students here, recent graduates anyways. I'll be teaching at a university locally. Hopefully we can get you back in to talk to some of our young people and make your powerful voice heard again. Thank you, Eva. So much appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to meet all of you.
Okay, we'll see you again soon, Eva. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Peter and I were sitting at the bar. I'll tell you something about me, Peter. We were sitting at the bar at Pupkey in New York and in West Village. Eva posted to Peter a direct message saying that she needed to be on his podcast because she had something important to say. And Peter immediately responded with, "I'll have Danny set it up." So, I'm watching this on Peter's phone, and I said, Eva. Maybe we can do something sooner. And here she is. So anyway, so I appreciate her coming on to us in a very direct way. She has a powerful message to send about. I was going to ask her questions, but I didn't want to get it too late, about institutions that stand in the way. When we say institutions, things like the IMF, the World Bank, that stand in the way of actually dealing with what we Westerners call poverty in Africa. We exploit the resources. I hate to say it. We take the resources, we buy them off. Anybody's read the book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, this is a well-traveled path where, Western countries, whether they're Belgium and the Congo, or the UK, or, Italy or France, Africa has been the victim of a lot of exploitation over the years. And as Eva said very eloquently, before colonialism, they had a lifestyle. And they took what they needed, and they were happy, and they lived their lives and tended to their crops and their livestock and their families in a way that was wholesome and generous. And of course, the Western model, financial model imposed on that, redefines for Africans the kind of value system that we think that they should have. So this is the problem that we all face with, again, whether it's in Eastern Europe, Africa, Latin America, South America, global South Asia. These are issues that, as they say, Bitcoin fixes this, maybe. But Bitcoin definitely is a step in the right direction.
So Alex Gladstone.
Yes. Yes.
For him, Bitcoin is helping these countries come out from under the scourge.
Right.
Because our service.
Right.
I'm sorry to use the word. Cheap labor.
Right. No, I mean, this
That's
is,
what Bitcoin does. Serving has.
this has been the story, in the development of modern, since the internet and modern supply chains. It's where you go where the cheap
This would be a good
sources of labor
segue
are.
with this guy trying to.
I lived in China, for anybody that doesn't know, for 8 years.
I only have a quarter.
And there's a little town in
I lost my
south
wireless
western
mic.
China
So we
that
can
makes
walk
blue
up to
jeans.
Yeah, like how we usually do it.
And everything in the town is blue. The water, the streets, the buildings, everything's turned blue from the dye. We take advantage of the fact that some places that are developing, or the developing world, doesn't have the regulations in place that we have here. The quality of our water, the quality of our life, the quality of our air, the quality of our food. If we don't want to pay for it, we just go take it wherever we can get it in the world, so that our lifestyle, actually, we've had deflation over many, many years. We get things cheaper today than we ever got them before. And that's because we exploit those places in the world where we can take resources, labor and resources at cost we could never get them here in the domestic U.S., which is rich in resources. We have all the resources we need to be self-sufficient, but they're too expensive because we want to enjoy good water, good air, good healthy lifestyle. So anyway, all right, we'll get off my soapbox. I want to thank everybody for paying attention, for coming to this tonight. Smaller group than we had last time, but a very important group because you guys pay attention, and I think we're able to absorb some of this message. I said at the beginning that we're trying to give you back something for these meetups. We want to do them monthly. Next month, I hope we have as a guest speaker John Dennehy, who's running an education project in South America. John is running the My First Bitcoin Diploma program. There's a book on the back table there. You might, there is. That's John is a sponsor of these meetups, by the way. My First Bitcoin is a sponsor of our Bit Cafe. sorry. But also he's going to come on and be a guest speaker at the meetup. And so that workbook is given out to grade school, primary and secondary students in El Salvador, most of whom have not gone past third grade, to teach them about financial literacy and self-sovereignty and financial independence and freedom, right? So, and another important topic, the education of these countries in the global south that are adopting new forms of payments and new forms of store value like Bitcoin in order to free themselves and their resources and their people from the yoke that's imposed by our institutions so that we have a financial privilege, we have a voting privilege, in the system. And that's not to say that we're bad, or that we should fall down so that they get up. We can all do this together, and we can all make improvements together if we look at this from a different perspective.
And it's giving back the privilege we've been given.
And it's fair. I mean, it's fair. We talk about fair trade, we talk about free trade and fair trade. It's a fair, we need a fair system. We can only get to a fair system when we have a monetary system that's fair. And we're the victims, even in this developed U.S., of an unfair monetary system. So I'll refer you to Lynn Alden or somebody to hear about how the Fed is now bankrupt. Anyway, okay, anybody else? So the team here, Jack is our lead on basically anything that has to do with Lightning or with payments or with Noster. Yeah, anything. All right, he's our engineer. Joe is our sort of, the calm voice in the room because I get excited and he likes to calm me down, which is good. He's sort of the general manager of everything that happens here. So he does the tech, but he also makes sure that we pull together a good agenda for everybody to work with. Joe works for Gemini, by the way. He's an he's an account manager for Gemini. So if you got any questions about Gemini, ask Joe. Anything about bridges, ask Jack. No, never mind. And Michael's working, he's down from New Hampshire. He's just a relatively new Haven resident. Yes, Michael's better half. Oh, she stepped out to get a trainer. Anyway, Michael's going to be working with us again in the future to try to pull these meetups together. We have 60 people registered for the meetup group, not for this meetup, but for the meetup group. Which if I look at all the other meetups, Bitcoin-related meetups in New Haven, we're far and away bigger than anybody else. We're not going to stop there. We want to keep working and try to make it, 100 people in the group and get a bigger turnout for this and keep it growing. So, I want to thank everybody for that. Anybody have anything to say? Jack? Michael? Anybody?
Everyone, it's great to meet all of you and see some of your returning faces. If anyone, I would like for us to kind of break out and hand the microphone off to anyone who wants to just present to the group anything that you're working on, any projects, just an introduction, maybe your Bitcoin story or your ads, what you're looking for, how you'd like to get involved, if there's anything like that. Anyone at all?
Well, yeah, I'll join you. I just want to add, because the effort you made all to come out here tonight. So we have some giveaways, which we try to do. We have some free drinks, which if you haven't taken advantage of, pick up a coin and get a free drink. In fact, we might have enough coins left over where we get a second drink. How's that? I want to use those coins up, and we're paying for it anyway. But we also have some coffee. So I'm happy. It's El Salvador's finest coffee. He's going to shoot me, I'm sure. It's expensive. But I'd like everybody to walk away with a bag of El Salvador's finest coffee. And coffee cups, t-shirts, extra large, whatever.
Yeah, I think I'll give it up real quick. I think it's important for the group to learn a little bit more about myself and and maybe Jack as well, our contributions to the project. I know I talked last time, but my name is Joe. I'm a local Connecticut resident. Really quickly, just want to talk about what brought me into Bitcoin and why I'm so passionate about technology. So I'm a born and raised Connecticut resident. I grew up here in Connecticut, in the Middletown now. And out of high school, I graduated in 2010 and I joined the Army. And for the next 5 or 6 years, I was away, I was overseas, I was stateside. And I hadn't heard about Bitcoin. I was interested in business and finance. Once I got home and I went back to school here in Connecticut in 2016, I got a finance degree. And went to business school, I learned about finance, I learned about banking, finance side. And it wasn't until 2017 that I learned about Bitcoin. And what really drew me into the technology was the freedom aspect of it. And it was also the problems that it solved within finance. So the total spend problem, the fact that you can pay someone and trust that that payment is valid, it will not bounce, it is there. The final settlement of Bitcoin, the fact that I can send money to someone and it settles and it's received and it's final and in your account is fascinating. And then that just sent me down a rabbit hole. And since 2017 and 18, I've been learning more about it. I'm trying to get more involved with the community. Jack and I live in Central Connecticut. We're trying to build more networks in the state. And we visited El Salvador twice last year. And that really motivated us to help contribute to community learning and education. So it's a big part of me. So outside of my role right now in the space, I also mine Bitcoin on a smaller scale in Bristol, Connecticut, and I contribute to the work that the Big Project and the Bitcoin projects here in the state. We're looking forward to hosting more events. Jack, maybe a little bit about yourself as well, so people can know what they're doing.
Like Joe said, my name is Jack Boothwick. I'm from Central Connecticut as well, civil engineer, so Bitcoin kind of naturally came to me from the engineering perspective. And it really started to open up to me when I started learning about this, like the relationship to the electrical grid, and as well as integrating it as a full system approach. So it kind of hit me as like fiat games first, and then as I learned more about Bitcoin and learned deeply as to what it means and what it represents, it's something way bigger than I can even imagine. The whole engineering side is really why I do it, is because you kind of answer a lot of questions for the kind of brought the world into perspective for me as to how I envision the world should be, and it moved everything together. So as far as my passions, besides civil engineering, I'm kind of like the head guy on the lightning aspect right now. Super into that technology, running a routing node, trying to earn yield on top of your Bitcoin while holding custodial or non-custodially. So I'm hoping to integrate payment processors for the Big Cafe project and hopefully link us with any of our sponsors and any of our institutions that we're connected with to build a direct peer-to-peer network. So that's really what the future is. So I invite everyone to learn about Lightning and partake if you haven't already. It's the future. If Bitcoin's going to have a future, Lightning's going to be in it. So you better start learning about it now.
We'll be hosting education stuff.
So I have a question. Anybody running a node in here? So I'd be curious to hear about that, because the node is one of those things that has been talked about, and how do you protect the chain and ensure that it's being run properly. So I don't know enough about it except I'd be curious to know what that's right.
Again, the attempt will be to do this in step-by-step educationally, right? I mean, we'll do this to Meetup. We'll try to have a more scheduled session of training.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you gave that feedback. So no content is great. Wallets. How many people here have a wallet other than Coinbase or Kraken or Exchange? So you have an independent wallet and you can accept it. Okay, great. How many people in here have used the Lightning Network at all for a Lightning transaction?
So I want to
Awesome.
learn about all these, hands-on, because the thing that really is intimidating for most people is how do you do this without people maybe saying, this is dollars and cents? How does it become that intimidating? Oh, it's easy to run.
Yeah, wonderful. And that's what we're looking to incorporate into these meetups. So I'm glad that we got that feedback tonight. For meetups moving forward, what we're hoping to do is have half of the meetup educational. So a session on, spinning up your own wall, how to set up your own node, what all this means. And then the second half will be a guest speaker or someone in person, hopefully sooner rather than later. That feedback is super valuable. We appreciate that. Is there anyone else that wants to contribute at all, or talk about your story, or about Bitcoin, or just set your own intentions, or what you want to see in the future? Yeah.
Question for you guys is, are you trying to be completely public with your identity in terms of the greater the reach, the better publicly, or are you trying to be extremely localized, like peer-to-peer, if you will? For instance, what you're doing here is very local, personal, versus what Bitcoin did is a very global communication channel.
For me, it goes back to what I mentioned is last year, Jack and I went to El Salvador, Steve went to El Salvador. The main takeaways I think that we had being down there was learning about the importance of community education, starting from the ground up approach. And that was one of the main things that I came home with, is not so much focusing on targeting the world, but just targeting our local community and spreading education from within from this hub. In Connecticut, which ironically we're right a street down from sport management here at Yale, which is the heart of the fiat system. In Connecticut, in New York City, right? This is where the fiat system is headquarters at, HQ. So I almost feel like there's no better place to plant a flagpole and start teaching locals about the technology, how to use it, how to preserve the wealth, and how to educate others as well. So I think the community approach is what we're looking to do.
To that point, meetups are becoming a very important way to do this kind of local grassroots organizing, this local grassroots education, right? So in Nashville, they have a Bitcoin Park. In Austin, they have Bitcoin. Anyway, there are different meetups. There's a grassroots Telegram channel that basically is talking about all the different meetups around the country. We're trying again to fit into that. We're reaching out, mass adoption. We've all attended Jason Lowry's talk up at mass adoption. I go down occasionally to Crypto Mondays down in Stanford. They have a different agenda, but nonetheless, we're trying to reach out to other communities and bring people in. Kind of share the information, etc. But as Joe said, this is an important local implementation of a grassroots, bottoms-up effort. I mean, nobody should wait around and kind of twiddle their fingers, their thumbs, while we're waiting for the system to tell us about monetary innovation. It ain't going to happen. We've got to do it ourselves. We've got to learn ourselves. We've got to get our hands dirty and try it.
Zoom is a weird blend of in-person and not.
Right.
And unless you are in person, you're double man, adopting this paradigm shift, I don't think it happens.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And, hey. All right. Good. How are you? All right. You guys can do that. Get Yeah. Okay, so once again, this is an attempt to be grassroots, an attempt to reach out, build a community. Again, spread the word. I mean, as a student of history and philosophy, I've always wondered how movements go, how movements start, right? When you think about some of the greatest movements in the world, Islam, Christianity, whatever, how do they start? Well, they start, with basically clandestine meetings, a few people gathering in a room, talking about things, getting passionate about it, and then going out and essentially face to face, talking to their friends, talking to other people, and getting them engaged to the point where it spreads. And once it spreads, it's organic. It's hard to stop. So we're not waiting around for people up the street to teach a course in Bitcoin. A secret, they never will. It's antithetical to their existence. But there are students. I think there's a student here from the School of Management that is interested in what's going on and how this works. So the doors are open. We're putting ourselves out there. I don't expect a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Who knows? But we're doing this as something that we think is valuable and important. We're all passionate about it. Almost everybody holds a day job. Me excluded. I suppose this is my day job. But almost everybody holds a day job, and everybody has to work, to pay the bills, etc. And this is something that is a passion that we do afterwards. So, okay, thanks very much. Again, appreciate you all coming. We're going to do something again next month. I may be zooming in from El Salvador. I think I'm heading down to El Salvador sometime middle of next month to meet up with some people on the Pit Cafe project. But John Dennehy, hopefully we get him in as a speaker, and everything is in good hands here. All right, thank you again.
That's on.